If you're over the age of 60, there's a good chance you already keep an eye on your blood pressure, your cholesterol, maybe even your blood sugar. Most of us have been trained to think of health in terms of the heart, the joints, or the numbers we see at our annual checkup. But there's one organ that rarely comes up in these conversations, even though it may be affected by our daily choices just as much as anything else: the brain. What you eat every single day may be quietly shaping how sharp, focused, and clear-headed you feel, not just today, but for years to come. Most people assume that memory changes with age are simply inevitable, something you either get or you don't, like gray hair or reading glasses. And there is some truth to that. The brain does change over time, just like the rest of the body. Blood flow patterns shift, certain processes slow down, and the brain's ability to repair itself may become less efficient. None of that means something is wrong. It's simply part of aging, the same way joints stiffen a little and energy levels change. But here's what many people don't realize. Research increasingly suggests that certain everyday foods, eaten regularly over long periods, may contribute to inflammation, reduced blood flow, and oxidative stress in the brain. These are the same processes that have been studied in connection with cognitive decline in some long-term research. In other words, the foods sitting in your refrigerator or pantry right now might be doing more than filling your stomach. They may be part of a much longer story about how your brain ages. Before we go any further, an important note. This video is not meant to diagnose any condition, and it is not a substitute for medical advice. If you have concerns about your memory, focus, or brain health, please speak with a neurologist or your primary care doctor. Everything we're discussing today is general, evidence-informed information intended to help you think more critically about your daily habits, not a personal medical recommendation, and not a replacement for professional evaluation if you're experiencing symptoms that concern you. With that in mind, let's walk through 7 foods that many neurologists and nutrition researchers suggest keeping to a minimum, especially after the age of 60, when the brain may already be more vulnerable to inflammation and reduced blood flow than it was decades earlier. The first is fried food. Think fried chicken, French fries, donuts, and anything cooked repeatedly in hot oil. These foods are high in unhealthy fats that have been associated with inflammation throughout the body, including the brain. Some research has linked diets high in fried food with lower scores on memory and thinking tests in older adults, although scientists are still working to understand exactly why this connection exists. One theory involves the oils themselves. When oil is heated repeatedly to high temperatures, as it often is in commercial fryers, it can break down into compounds that may contribute to oxidative stress, a kind of cellular wear and tear that has been connected to aging-related brain changes. Enjoying fried food occasionally, at a family gathering or a rare treat, isn't likely to cause any measurable harm on its own. The concern researchers raise is about regular, frequent consumption sustained over years, the kind of pattern where fried food becomes a weekly or even daily habit rather than an occasional indulgence. The second is sugary sodas and sweetened drinks. A cold soda or a sweetened iced tea feels harmless in the moment, refreshing and simple. But regularly drinking beverages high in added sugar has been associated in multiple studies with poorer memory performance and in some research with smaller brain volume measured over time using imaging studies. One possible explanation is that sugary drinks cause rapid spikes and crashes in blood sugar. Some researchers believe that repeated blood sugar swings, happening day after day for years, may affect the small blood vessels that supply the brain with oxygen and nutrients. This is similar to the way blood sugar spikes are already known to affect blood vessels elsewhere in the body. To be clear, an occasional soda at a barbecue or a soft drink with dinner once in a while is not the concern here. It's the daily habit, repeated for years, that researchers are more focused on when they study long-term brain health outcomes. The third is processed and cured meats. Bacon, sausage, deli ham, hot dogs, and similar products that have become a fixture of quick breakfasts and easy lunches for many households. These foods are convenient and flavorful, which is exactly why they've become so common, but they tend to be high in sodium and often contain preservatives called nitrates, which are used to extend shelf life and enhance color. Diets high in processed meat have been linked in some population studies to a higher risk of cognitive decline, and researchers believe this may be related to the effect these foods have on blood pressure and overall blood vessel health. High sodium intake, in particular, has long been connected to blood pressure regulation, and blood pressure that runs high consistently over many years may gradually affect the small blood vessels responsible for keeping the brain properly supplied with oxygen. This is one more reason many doctors recommend treating processed meat as an occasional food, something enjoyed now and then, rather than a daily staple at breakfast or lunch. The fourth is excess alcohol. For some adults, a glass of wine with dinner or a drink at a social gathering is simply part of normal life, and moderate consumption isn't necessarily harmful for everyone. The distinction researchers draw is between moderate, occasional consumption and regular drinking that exceeds recommended limits. Studies following people over long periods of time have associated heavier drinking patterns with brain shrinkage and memory problems, particularly in older adults. Alcohol affects brain tissue directly, and its effects tend to become more pronounced with age, partly because the body processes alcohol less efficiently as we get older, meaning the same amount that felt manageable at 40 may affect the body differently at 65 or 70. If you drink, doing so in moderation and having an honest conversation with your doctor about what's appropriate given your personal health history and any medications you take is generally considered the more cautious path. The fifth is refined white bread and pastries. Foods made from refined flour, stripped of much of their natural fiber during processing, tend to digest very quickly, causing rapid spikes in blood sugar similar to the patterns seen with sugary drinks. Some researchers believe that diets consistently high in refined carbohydrates may contribute to inflammation and insulin resistance over time, and both of these processes have been studied in connection with cognitive decline in aging populations. This doesn't mean that bread itself is somehow dangerous or that all carbohydrates should be avoided. Whole grains, which retain their fiber and nutrients, behave very differently in the body compared to refined, heavily processed versions. The concern researchers highlight is specifically about diets where refined, low-fiber options like white bread, pastries, and similar baked goods make up a large and frequent part of daily eating. The sixth is high-sodium packaged and canned foods. Canned soups, packaged snack foods, and instant or frozen meals are often loaded with sodium, both to extend shelf life and to improve flavor in products that might otherwise taste bland after processing. It's not unusual for a single serving of certain canned soups or frozen dinners to contain most or even all of a person's recommended daily sodium intake. As mentioned earlier in connection with processed meat, high sodium intake is closely tied to blood pressure regulation, and blood pressure plays a significant role in how well blood flows through the vessels that supply the brain. Reading nutrition labels, comparing sodium content between similar products, and choosing lower sodium versions when they're available are simple, practical habits that may support both heart and brain health over the years, without requiring you to give up convenience foods entirely. The seventh is foods containing artificial trans fats. Some packaged baked goods, certain margarines, and select fried fast foods still contain artificial trans fats, even though many countries, including the United States, have restricted their use in commercial food production over the past decade. Trans fats have been associated with increased inflammation throughout the body and with higher levels of LDL cholesterol, sometimes referred to as the less favorable type of cholesterol. And both of these factors have been linked to reduced brain health in long-term population studies. One practical way to check for hidden trans fats is to look at the ingredient list on packaged foods for the phrase partially hydrogenated oil. Even if a product's label claims 0 grams of trans fat, small amounts can sometimes still be present under labeling rules that allow rounding down below a certain threshold. So checking the ingredient list itself, not just the nutrition facts panel, gives a clearer picture. It's worth pausing here to talk about why the brain in particular seems so sensitive to these dietary patterns, even though it's protected inside the skull and seems on the surface disconnected from what happens in the stomach or the bloodstream. The brain is an extraordinarily demanding organ. Despite making up only about 2% of total body weight, it uses roughly 20% of the body's energy and oxygen at rest. That means it depends heavily on a steady, reliable supply of blood flow, and it's remarkably sensitive to anything that disrupts that supply, even temporarily or in small ways. Blood vessels throughout the brain are tiny and delicate, and researchers believe they may be particularly vulnerable to the kind of long-term inflammation and blood vessel damage associated with the dietary patterns we've discussed today. This is part of why so many of the same foods linked to heart disease keep showing up in research on brain health as well. The two systems, cardiovascular and cognitive, appear to be far more connected than most people realize, which is one reason many neurologists now describe brain health and heart health as two sides of the same coin, rather than separate concerns to manage independently. Now, having gone through all 7, it's worth stepping back and putting this information into perspective. None of these foods need to disappear from your life completely, and no credible nutrition expert is suggesting that a single slice of bacon or one soda will meaningfully harm your brain. Most nutrition experts don't recommend an all-or-nothing approach to eating, because that kind of restrictive thinking is often difficult to sustain and can create its own stress around food. Instead, the focus tends to be on frequency and overall balance. Enjoying fried food occasionally at a restaurant, having a soda now and then at a family gathering, or eating deli meat once in a while on a sandwich is very different from making any of these foods a daily habit sustained over the course of many years. What tends to matter most, according to much of the research on brain health, is the overall pattern of your diet across weeks, months, and years, not any single food or any single day. Diets that emphasize vegetables, fruits, whole grains, fish, nuts, and olive oil, often referred to collectively as brain healthy or Mediterranean-style eating patterns, have been associated with slower rates of cognitive decline in several long-term studies following older adults over many years. These eating patterns aren't about strict rules or eliminating entire food groups. They're about shifting the overall balance of what typically fills your plate so that vegetables, whole grains, and healthy fats show up far more often than fried, processed, or heavily refined options. Consider Robert, 68 years old, who spent much of his career working long hours and relying on convenience for most meals. For years, he ate fast food for lunch several times a week and often finished his evenings with a soda while watching television. It wasn't a dramatic or unusual pattern. It was simply what fit into a busy schedule. After a routine checkup revealed his cholesterol numbers were higher than his doctor would like, he had a conversation about small, sustainable changes rather than a complete overhaul. He gradually shifted toward more home-cooked meals during the week, swapped his evening soda for water or unsweetened tea on most days, and started thinking of fried food as an occasional treat rather than a regular lunch option. He didn't change everything overnight, and he didn't follow a strict diet plan. The changes happened slowly, over several months, fitting around his existing routine rather than replacing it entirely. His medical checkups remained the true measure of his progress, but he also noticed something on his own. He felt more consistently alert through the afternoon, without the sluggish, foggy feeling that used to hit him around 3 o'clock most days. Stories like Robert's illustrate something important about brain health, and about health in general as we age. It tends to be shaped far more by long-term patterns repeated consistently than by any single meal, any single food, or any single day of eating. The goal isn't to fear food, to feel guilty about an occasional treat, or to memorize a list of forbidden items. The goal is simply to become more aware of what regularly ends up on your plate, week after week, and to make small, sustainable shifts in that pattern where they make sense for your life, your preferences, and your health circumstances. It's also worth remembering that food is only one piece of a much larger picture when it comes to brain health. Regular physical activity, even something as simple as a daily walk, has been associated with better blood flow to the brain and may support cognitive function over time. Quality sleep allows the brain to carry out important maintenance processes that researchers believe play a role in clearing waste products that accumulate during waking hours. Staying socially connected and mentally engaged through conversation, reading, puzzles, or learning new skills has also been studied in connection with maintaining cognitive sharpness later in life. None of these factors work in isolation. They tend to work together, reinforcing each other over months and years, much like the pieces of a larger puzzle. For anyone looking for a practical starting point rather than a long list of things to avoid, many dietitians suggest focusing on simple substitutions rather than sudden elimination. Swapping a fried side dish for a baked or grilled version, choosing sparkling water with a splash of fruit juice instead of soda, opting for fresh or roasted meats instead of cured deli slices a few times a week, and reading labels for sodium and hydrogenated oils when shopping are all small, manageable steps. None of these require special equipment, unusual ingredients, or a significant increase in cooking time. They simply shift the balance of a kitchen's everyday staples a little further toward the foods researchers associate with better long-term outcomes, and a little further away from the ones we've discussed today. Change introduced this way tends to be more sustainable than a strict short-term diet because it becomes part of the normal rhythm of grocery shopping and meal preparation rather than something that requires constant willpower. If there's one thing to take away from today's video, it's this. Your daily food choices are one of the few things related to brain health that are largely within your control. You can't change your genetics, and you can't turn back the clock on your age. But you can choose, meal after meal, day after day, what you put on your plate. Small, consistent choices, a bit more vegetables here, a little less processed food there, mindful portions of the foods we discussed today, tend to add up over months and years in ways that are difficult to notice day to day, but become meaningful over the long run. If you found this video helpful, consider subscribing for more evidence-based health content designed specifically for adults who want to stay sharp, active, and independent as they age. And if you've made a change to your own diet that's made a noticeable difference for you, whether it was cutting back on soda, cooking more meals at home, or simply reading labels more carefully, we'd love to hear about it in the comments below. Your experience might be exactly what encourages someone else to take that first small step. Until next time, take care of yourself, stay curious about the choices you make every day, and remember that protecting your brain, much like protecting your heart, is built one meal at a time. This video is for general informational and educational purposes only and does not constitute medical advice. It is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease and should not replace guidance from a licensed physician or neurologist. Always consult your doctor before making changes to your diet, especially if you have an existing medical condition or take prescription medication.